I'm Kevin Oeste here at the 2018 PRI Show, and events like this are often called reunions. You get to see a lot of people that you work with, maybe that you sell parts to, and a lot of racers are able to get together and tell stories of previous times. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to have a reunion with these gentlemen joining me here on the stage now. And what we're looking at are a lot of guys who have been involved with the National Muscle Car Association and streetcar drag racing in particular since it really started to kind of get organized, and in some cases the late 80s and early 90s. So from the far end down, we have our friend Gary Rhoe, David Freiburger, Nick Scavo, Bill Torvato, and Tony Bischoff. And you guys, first of all, thank you all for coming here. This is a really cool thing for me, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And to kind of get the ball rolling, all of you guys are engine builders and racers, and we have David, who was
has no skills,
but he's really good looking, so that's all that matters.
You picked up on that, so here we go. David's function here at this point in this context was one of the guys who was writing for Hot Rod Magazine, not only covering the events, but also you had a hand in some of the rule book stuff back in the day.
I dare say we created the thing. I mean, there was stuff going on in the late 80s that we weren't involved with, like the Top Gun shootout that happened in Atlanta and a few other things like that. But in '92, we got together at a staff meeting and everybody was talking about who's got the fastest street car, and there was a guys in Chicago and there was a guys in Detroit and everything. And ultimately, Jeff Smith, Richard Small from Flowmaster, Joe Pettit, myself, we sat around and said there's only one way to sort this out, is have a fastest street car in America shootout. And we did that in Memphis, and it really blew up and became all the streetcar racing that you see now.
Yeah, and that's cool that you say the streetcar racing you see now, because I think that really kind of truly evolved, because back in those days when you guys were doing this stuff at your local tracks or whatnot, these were a lot of cars that were street legal, but still kind of barely.
I'm not even sure that we were doing it at we would go to the track, but a lot of the times it was street racing.
Yeah.
This evolved from being on the street, and then somebody said, well, you're going to have to put on a window net, you're going to have a parachute, and you're going to, all those things. But really, we had street cars out there that were just decided to bring to the track and see if they would fit into the rules.
Well, and so the cool thing there is that there were a lot of things on these cars that made them more street racers than outright visually race cars. These things, like your Impala in particular, was designed to kind of fly under the radar.
It was, but I mean, like even in the mid or let's say early 90s, I mean, there was a Rambler, if you guys remember, in our class. Back when you were actually still in Super Street, there was 100 cars showing up to race in a 64-car field. I'm telling you, that was something. That, to this day, being a racer in that field, it was almost as cool just to spectate. It was that cool to see that.
Was it NMCA at that time?
That would have been NMCA, yeah.
Yeah, because the NMCA was being run by Russ and Ivar Schmeltniks, who had founded RHS. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is that they were really just a stock muscle car association until we came in with that first Memphis event. Basically, all you guys just blew it up and turned into, the cars became really well known and all the big tire stuff. And then we had to make the Super Street class for the small tires. And I think that's actually what all of you guys did. You all ran small tire cars.
The first time I saw like Jim Huber's '69 Chevelle,
yeah.
I legitimately remember going, I want to do this. No, I mean, he had 10-inch tires. It was a car. I want to race against that guy. That was that, and Bobby DeAndrea's car would show up at the shootouts, and those cars were just so fun to read about. Being the nerd, like the guy reading in the magazine, that was me. I was going, I'm gonna race this guy.
Yeah.
That was cool.
You're still a nerd.
Well, yeah, I changed.
Well, I think we need to tell the audience, Nick, about your car, because everybody I know remembers this thing. 65 Impala, all black car, small tire car, and just mind-blowing what that thing did. I ran 890s initially.
Yeah, and then eventually went to 830s. But it used to sit in my garage, and Chuck Samuel would come by and go, so how's the unfinished car museum going? And I had all these cars in the garage that weren't finished. And then in one season, they were all running and done. And he got a fire under my butt because the El Camino was at the race. The El Camino would have been the next car that, from our perspective, the Chicago.
Oh yeah, Chuck's El Camino was dominant. That thing was amazing.
But I mean, we would go to races, and like Torvato would be there with an honest-to-God Oldsmobile engine in an honest-to-God Oldsmobile, and that's back when
we were racing cars.
Yeah, they were
actual cars.
They weren't racing.
They weren't spaceships. You know what I mean? It's funny because even when I watch some of the new TV shows right now, and they have like a billet housing and all this stuff, I'm going, man, we welded a housing together ourselves. You know, I put braces on a 12 bolt. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And nowadays, it's the housing was worth more than my Impala was.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and, you know, like David started to ask you about the car, I tell people some of the details about that car. So it was a bench seat essentially with a column shift and a car that ran 8-second quarter miles, you know, but it wasn't a bench seat and a column shift. It had a ratchet shifter built into that column, you know, street race thing. It had a trailer hitch on the back, but you know, that's where the parachute attached to. So
Well, and back in the day, they were all nitrous cars.
It was.
Yeah.
We could do, all of us could do that stuff on our own in the garage. It wasn't like we needed. I mean, right now, if you would give me the same car and give me a laptop, it'd be flying.
Yeah.
The problem is we didn't have that stuff. We actually turned on nitrous based on, you know, taking this much timing out for this stage and this much for this stage. There was no ramps and
And it was single
dots.
4-barrel stuff, and it was
Oh.
conventional head stuff. We're not talking, you know, what you're seeing out there these days.
Yeah,
there's a great piece of video on YouTube. You can find it. It's, I think it was Horsepower TV.
Scimitar Entertainment, probably.
Well,
You're
it was-
talking about the videos that they were doing there?
No, this is following Nick on the Power Tour in '95.
Yeah,
96
yeah,
with
yeah.
the Impala, and he's driving this Impala, right? And you took the full race engine out, put a slightly less compression one in, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
And he's going on the road, and there's like a Sharp brand
Das,
or
you know,
NEC laptop, right? Laptop.
A 386.
Yeah, it's like a 286 laptop with a flip-up LCD screen. It's a light gray laptop, and Nick is talking to Joe Elmore, who's
Yeah.
in the car, and Nick goes, and we can drive the car, we can change our air-fuel ratio on this laptop computer. And he comes over and he's like,
Mind blown.
And I did punch the keys very hard. I wasn't very smart. I'm not any
and
smarter
in the
than
90s, we're all watching that going, oh my God, look at that. It's a 65 car running on a computer. It's unbelievable. So, Bill, you were actually a tech director, tech inspector for the NMCA for a
Yeah.
while?
97 to 2001.
And so what was that experience like when you'd come up against cars that you had to know? I mean, that must have been a pretty challenging job because, you know, Gary, you had your Mustangs that you were running,
Yeah.
and, you know, everybody had whatever, but you had to kind of look.
Well, yeah, they had a few guys, you know, coming in with big motors and stuff, and the current people that were there, they didn't really know, you know, and they asked me if I would come, and I said, yeah, why not? I'll give it a shot. And, you know, it was kind of, you'd see a guy that claimed 400 inch on a big block Chevy, but it had that much space between the water pump
Right.
hole and the deck. I didn't need to use a P&G test. But, you know, those are things I knew that I brought to the table. So we found quite a lot of stuff at first, and then it kind of tapered off. But there's a bunch of stories of guys trying to get away with stuff that we caught.
They weren't stories. As a matter of fact, I think on the cover of CarCraft, I put Gary Rhoe, cheating SOB? Right?
I would just call that creative interpreter of rules.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well, didn't, and David, you might remember this, didn't Baskerville discover an ice-cold bench seat in a Nova?
Oh, yeah.
With
And there was another one, I'll choose not to name names. There was a guy running in a class that was carbureted only, and he had EFI running underneath the intake manifold on the thing.
Yeah,
There's
nice.
a bunch of stuff like that.
Well,
that
the
went on.
ice-cold bench seat was a nitrous bottle buried in the upholstery of a
Right.
of a Nova.
Notice how Tony's not saying much about this.
None of my customers ever. Honest to goodness, I don't think they did.
No, that is true.
He was accused of it all the time.
That
is
true.
He never did anything that they accused him of.
No.
Most of it, anyway. So.
There was never a problem with Tony and his customers. Never. No, I'm
We
serious,
got
there wasn't.
accused of it a lot. but-
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But that's kind of an interesting point too, because when did you open your engine shop?
I opened in '85.
In '85. So I'm gathering that a lot of your involvement was also to help business, and you had a whole bunch of engines. It's still
Absolutely.
Do, yeah.
You know, I kind of got involved probably about '95. I don't remember when my employee and buddy Jim Huber started racing NMC. He was at probably one of the first
Yep.
Yeah, he was at the
first
92
Memphis
race.
races.
You said
And,
Huber? Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he got the fever bad. You know, and we didn't know anything at that point, so we grew a lot along with the NMCA, and yeah, and it was good. Really, it was pretty exciting. You know, we was talking about the first races and no laptops and carburetors. After the last round of qualifying at Memphis, it was death row. Usually, when you went through the pits, at least every other car had the engine out in the pits, and I thought that was almost insane, but that's how it was usually. So.
Yep.
I mean, we used to jokingly say we run top fuel. The car just doesn't know it. Because at Memphis that year, there wasn't a single car that didn't have the motor out of it, putting pistons in it. I mean, Dan Bills is putting pistons in the back of his pickup, his dually, and there's parts everywhere. Mark and we was in dirt. And we're going, really, Mark? Really? Seriously, dirt? Like he was working, but we had nowhere else to do this stuff. We were just. We had to fix the car to go racing again.
Yeah, totally.
Toothpaste and dirt to let valves in.
That'd be my car. It was toothpaste mixed with engine oil and trying to get a valve job done on it. We borrowed a valve from Tony Christian that was about 300 thousandths too long, stuck it on with spacers underneath the adjuster. And made it run. The car ran good, actually. I think it liked that. That's
the aftermarket had not caught up at the time. You know, at the time we would look at things and remember when it wasn't a street car if it had a Lenko. Well, now guys are driving those things around all the time. It wasn't a street car if it had, symmetrical port head on it. Now that's just normal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, and also I think the level of parts has come up so the guys aren't breaking things as much. Either that or people have learned how to tune a nitrous motor.
People have learned
Holes
how to
and
tune
pistons
much
were every
better.
race.
Much better, right?
Much better.
Every race.
Take timing out?
No.
What? Why would you
That's
have to
old
do
school.
that? Why would you have to do that?
There was a nitrous purveyor who said not to take timing
Yep,
out.
absolutely.
The
Yeah.
Unibomber.
Yeah, you remember the Unibomber?
You get one hit.
Yeah.
It was really fast for a second.
Well, and so Nick, you were always a nitrous guy going in, like Dave was saying, but you helped kind of pioneer a lot of these parts that you can buy today off the shelf.
I mean, got to be honest with you. Back in the day when I would daydream and you're driving the races, you're daydreaming and talking the whole time, and then I would talk to him, believe it or not, and he actually wound up flowing all of my nitrous solenoids. I mean, he was in another class at that point, and so my nitrous solenoids, which were named Trinity, Fat Man, and Little Boy. Yes, sir. Everybody knows who that is. And
luckily, they didn't become the fate of them.
Little Boy was insane. Remember, that was the big one. That one flowed. It would empty a bottle. It was just crazy. And then also we had on my Impala, we had on a stand in the garage with a tank underneath it. Me and Eric were nitrous flowing through it and solvent flowing through it, videotaping it on one of those big VHS videotape, just so I could see which port was getting the most, because it was a plate, And back then we'd run 220,000 jets of nitrous, and there was a lot of nitrous coming out of that thing,
Yeah.
Any of you guys ever run pushers?
I think they were outlawed. I don't think we were ever allowed to run the carbon dioxide.
We're not allowed.
I didn't ask that question.
No, I never did. Never did. Back in the day when we were stupid, we would still run tons of pressure to make the car leave the starting line hard. And I remember Dan Bills was walking by the one car we were racing against him, and Eric is in the trunk, and he opens up the bottle with the gauge on it, and it pins the gauge, and Dan Bills goes like this, and Eric goes, truthfully, it wasn't supposed to be that hot. It's just that Eric pulled it out of the dually because you keep him in the truck all warm. He pulled it out, and it was like 1,000,000 degrees. I mean, you know how many bottles we...
What about the time that it was hot?
Yep.
I think it was Chuck Samuel's trailer. He had maybe 18 nitrous bottles,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden there was the girls, I think, sitting there with the lawn chairs,
Yep.
and all of a sudden they started going off one by one.
Yep.
Oh.
People just, lawn chairs flying,
Scattered.
everybody running.
It was bad. Oh, it was bad. Our bottles were all over, at the time, we didn't know any better, so we were trying different stuff. So you'd overfill the bottle a little bit to have them. It didn't work. I mean, looking back, the way it
Guys were
worked the
heating
best
them
was...
with torches back then,
Yeah,
man.
that was not smart.
Not good.
That was not smart. We had the water. Didn't we have the water bottle where you put it in water? That was good.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we learned later on that it flowed best with 900 and some pounds anyways, but you didn't know.
No, I was with Huber once. We were in Columbus, Ohio, I think, and it was cold. It was late in the year. We took our nitrous bottles to the hotel with us, put them in the bathtub, and they went off in the bathtub.
Oh my God.
If I remember you from those years, you weren't in the bathtub.
No.
Yeah, really, we're not making meth here.
It might have been
We're
puking
racing.
in it, but
Might have been puking in it,
But
man.
what was cool about those days is legitimately the stuff that was made for your engine, the nitrous system, it was all that did it right there. You know what I mean? No, you didn't pull out your cell phone and text somebody, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Legitimately,
Yeah. Well, you had to do it.
yeah, you
It
did
was
it
fun.
yourself.
I think it was more fun. I mean, I almost feel sorry. For
It was torturous, man. Shit was always tore up. It's so much better now. Your memories is all wrong.
There was a lot of grumpy Mondays in the shop.
Oh, bad. You had to be in your 30s or younger. You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
That's so my involvement, I grew up minutes away from Nick, but we really didn't meet and get to know each other until a race in Florida. And I was working for Hot Rod TV covering NMCA races, so I was gone every weekend. And like you're saying, these cars had the engines out, every after qualifying and everything else. To me, some of the most fun was being in the pits after hours.
Oh, yeah.
And all the generators are running, all lights are on, and everybody's engine's out, and they're all frantically doing stuff. And specifically Joliet, because that was your home track, and Joliet for these guys became an event. I mean, this is more than just a race. So you mentioned Eric. That's Eric Von Berkham. He's in the audience over here. Is perpetrating a lobster boil, at the trailer, and Jeff DiAugustino, who's standing out here, and Graham, and all these guys are. So you've got an engine out, or a full gear set apart, or you're welding a 4-link back in the car.
Okay, no, okay. I'm going to tell you right now. Mark and I'm sitting in the starting line. I'm all strapped in. I go, which lane looks better? Because I had lane choice at that point for the qualifying. And Mark goes, middle one.
This is a Camaro at this point, right?
Yeah. So I put the car in first gear. All of a sudden the 4-link brakes, and I am left lane, right lane, left lane. Sorry, I am never asking you which lane to pick again. But we got the car back, and we had to take the housing out of the car, drive it to TRZ. We welded a new 4-link bracket on it. So all these guys are sitting back eating lobster, having fun, bibs on. We didn't get done till the daylight, and we raced the next day. And I had a cold piece of lobster when I was done.
Yeah, which is worth it.
No.
Well, that's what you would hear. So spectators would come, and we were trying to for the TV coverage, we're trying to get some audience reactions and get sound bites from people and whatnot. And most of you guys were the 10-inch tire guys for the most part, and the class above that was the Pro Street cars. And for being a full-on amateur event with not really much to win, there was some pretty big investments going on there, and some guys had invested a lot of money. And the question you'd always hear is like, these guys have been on their back in the pits all night, running this stuff and going crazy, and what are they winning? For what?
$3,000.
Yeah, right, total. And it's for that experience and the fun of doing it, of course, which I think, a lot of times they say that people are just in it for the money, they're not getting that level of commitment or passion or experience. And it was kind of universal. I mean, I don't think there was anybody there, especially after a couple rounds of qualifying, that was there kind of willy-nilly. I mean, everybody was in it.
And they were yelling at us like they were making $1 million. Let me
without
tell
a
you.
doubt.
Yeah, there was a lot of heat. As a matter of fact, who were you working for at the time in tech? Who was the guy?
Willie Benner.
Okay. Yep.
No, he wasn't. Were you working for Barefoot Willie then?
Yeah, Willie's the one that hired me.
Okay. Who was the guy before that? Stock eliminator racer from Louisiana or Texas?
Lonnie Grimm?
No, I don't remember.
Okay.
Huh.
Well, that's a great point, too, because in those days, do you remember?
Bob Myers.
Okay, maybe it was.
Bob Myers.
That sounds
Does that sound right?
Yeah, it sounds right.
Yeah.
We would learn that the classes have different rules, and different combinations got different weight breaks, and there was exceptions made for different things, and it became the battle of the nitrous guys versus the turbo cars and the supercharged cars.
Oh, nobody had a turbo back then.
Well, in the
that's
early
when they-
90s, no, right.
No, I mean, there was Gene
Not in
Deputy.
the early days, yeah.
Gene
And
Deputy.
it really didn't run that. He was a big tire car, but
I wasn't going to say it. But yeah.
No, I
Well,
mean,
no,
there was-
he would put together one pass that was amazing,
right.
and that was it. Because turbos just weren't the thing
The
then.
electronics hadn't been perfected yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what ended up happening, though, is like Nick was saying, he went from this ultra crowd-pleasing 65 Impala to a 69 Camaro, eventually that was turbo-powered,
Yep.
to be competitive. But in the early days, you had far more diversity in what you could do.
I'm just going to be honest with you. If the electronics had never showed up, we would have evolved, but it would have probably been more affordable for more people, and I think it would have been probably better. But maybe I'm wrong, because everything we did, everything changes. You can't
yeah.
stop progress.
Yeah, totally.
It's just the way it is. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The class that he wound up racing in, then, which would be Gary's class, that actually appealed to me more than where we wound up racing, in a way that, because I could have had two guys. me and another guy, and we could have just raced. We could have had fun. But
it was very
now
simple.
it became
You
an
need a
operation.
crew.
Yeah, and
You need-
and you're strapping yourself in a car, and all the cars can kill you. We know that, But you're legitimately going, okay, this is I'm serious here. You know what I mean? I'm not drunk. I'm not. I'm serious. I got to win, but I got to live. And it became more of a business. It seemed like in the later '90s. And then.
Any of you guys look at what's going on at Hot Rod Drag Week these days and think about driving these cars 1,000 miles and running sixes and look back at what we were doing in the 90s and how far it's come? Just crazy.
A lot of that is the technology that allows it to happen. Too.
Yep, it's turbos that allow it to happen.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I always thought was fascinating is being the reporter, the TV guy. I wasn't racing, so I had it easy. And at the end of Sunday, I could walk my happy self onto a plane and fly home, and that was only 60% of your journey because you still had to get back from wherever the track was, and that's a whole other.
And then he'd have a pile of customer motors that would be there to get repaired.
Yep, absolutely. Drive all night, get there back Monday morning, and don't go to bed.
Right.
Go to work.
And in your case, to New York.
Yeah, no, I always have a far drive, that's for sure.
Yeah. But as we've learned, some of those stories are good ones too, of doing the traveling and getting there and back and all the rest of it. It's all part of the experience.
Oh, we got to travel a lot. We got to see a lot of the country. We got to do
was
a
a
lot
lot.
of things. There's people sitting at home right now who worked every day of their life and they didn't get to do that stuff. I may not have any money, but I got a lot of good stories. So.
Yeah, but those Mondays were brutal for everyone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I learned to drink traveling with the NMCA for 3 years, I'll tell you that. We used to go rent go-kart tracks, and it would get ugly. Yeah, you just walk in, hand the kid $200 and go home for the night.
So, Gary, tell us about how this is evolved for you, and what's your involvement with this stuff today? Are you still playing with these cars? Or?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess, I don't know, when did Easy Street start? 95, 96?
It was probably 97, maybe something like
Because
that.
it broke
95,
off of
96.
Super Street, and then
Yeah.
they decided to
Right.
use that new tire. Remember, that was the street legal
Oh,
tire.
yeah.
That was a tire you guys
Well,
had.
when we
Right.
started, they didn't even have the AT Street. We used to use the M&H.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. When
Okay,
I
yeah.
started, they didn't have that, and I went to a few races. Whatever the first year was, I ran. I don't remember. And then I don't know, 96 or 97, I started working for Tony, and got serious about it, and built engine combination. It was fast, and won a lot of races. And
Oh, it
He still
wasn't
has the
fa-
car.
It wasn't fast. It was his car
it was
won.
fast.
Anything it went to, it made money. I mean, even if it didn't win, it still was in the money. I mean, it was a good car.
Yeah, I mean, it was just we built a good combination, and Tony was the brains behind it. I just worked on it and drove it. You always wanted to try stuff, try to be faster, and
You think something that simple, but he worked his ass off
Oh, yeah.
on that.
Oh, yeah.
You
I
just,
believe
most of that car was welded together himself.
Yeah.
Old
Yeah,
MIG welder sitting on jack stands. I mean, it was pretty crude.
Yeah,
and that's
it
what
got
made it cool.
well, that and if I didn't work for you, I would have never been afforded the opportunity to do it because it cost a lot of money to do it. You know that.
Absolutely. If I hadn't been in with Fast Times, it wouldn't have. I couldn't have done it. I mean, let's be
Well,
honest.
yeah. I mean, whose boss would understand that?
Yeah, and how many bosses out there will let you take off, on Friday or Monday, to go race practically every weekend and not have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate that, that I was able to do that and be part of it. So
I'm gathering that I was the only guy who was actually paid to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you made money.
I made more money than all.
we spent money, you made it.
Yeah.
That's what we were actually hoping had happened in our sport. We were all daydreaming that it would have eventually afforded us enough money to do this for a living and not make a ton of money, not to be millionaires, but it would have been nice to get enough money where the effort would have been, paid back. And it really was paid back in fun and paid back by nice people that you got to meet and fans. I'm not going to deny any of that. But money, no.
I was in the class that I ran. I was very fortunate, with the payout at the racetrack and the contingency. And I mean, it was 3-4 years I won $85,000, $90,000 a year racing with the NMCA, and
He did.
you know
He's
that,
the only
that-
one.
He is.
and it covered my engine parts, you know, my travel. Didn't cover my time, but where can you go have that much fun? Meet the, you know, as many nice people as we met.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we're all a family. You know, where else are you going to go do that?
And I'm not sure that there was a single one of us, even people that you would almost consider enemies, you know what I mean, that you wouldn't have helped at the track.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A lot of
Yeah.
that.
Everybody
I
helped
mean, I don't think
everybody.
it would have been a thing
Unless
I
it was
wouldn't-
Tony Christian.
I would have helped him. He might not help. No, he did. He gave me a bell.
He was the guy everyone loved to hate at the time. Remember him and Rieger going at it?
Oh yeah.
Tony was great because he had that larger than life personality that was, you know, beyond confident.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you talked to him, it was like you were annoying the hell out of him. What do you want? You know, always a big chore, but a great guy.
Yeah.
You know? And what I loved about Tony is his ability to back that up. So he'd sit there, you know, and he'd watch all the cars go by down the track. He'd watch Pat and everybody, and all right, now I'm going to run. And he'd do it. And it was like,
Okay, but you remember he'd be riding. You remember Bob Rieger?
Yeah.
He'd be riding Rieger the whole time, going, "Wow, if I had your money, you and your money." And finally, Rieger got mad one day and threw his wallet on the car. He goes in this driver's seat. He goes, "If you think the money's so important, let's see that money beat you right now."
Yeah.
He goes, "I got to drive the car. Apparently, it's me." And so Tony realized,
yeah.
and Rieger did a good job. I mean,
Rieger did a great job, and he was one of the most frustrated people in the organization because I think he had a mentality that was a little bit different. I mean, he enjoyed doing it, but he spent a lot of money. Remember the one year he had 2 semis?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and for an amateur race series. And I said, what's going on with this? And Bob talked fast. He was an intense guy. He made his money in the tech world. He owned an internet service provider, you know, like equivalent of you know, like an AOL competitor early on, and sold that and went racing. And I said, what are you going to do with the second trailer? You got one car and, you know, small crew. He said, no, I'm going to have people come in and we're going to put videos on the wall and they can come in and they can have something to eat and drink and get out of the hot air. And I'm like, this is we're in Rockingham. This is an amateur
do you
race.
do that when you would win a race with him? If you're standing in the winner's circle, you know, and he goes, "What do you drink?" And I'd be like, "Corona." Go get him a Corona. And the next race, he had a case of Corona.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I didn't win yet.
Well, it was
It doesn't happen that often.
Crown Royal. Was
He had
everywhere.
Crown Royal.
Oh, yeah.
And he and I talked about it. He approached Crown Royal to be a sponsor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it wasn't legal and he wasn't really big enough to do
They're
it.
like, no, we're making too much money off you now.
Why would we do that?
He's-
But some of his frustration came from, you know, him trying to win, and he had a series of car frustrations. I kind of felt bad for him because before he raced, he was in the high dollar show car circuit. So like the AMBR, America's Most Beautiful Roadster stuff. And he had this car, this amazing, super high dollar show car, and he had it, you know, competing at the Oakland Roadster Show, and he didn't win. And he's like, he grabs one of the judges, he's like, that's got the wheels, I got the wheels. That's got the paint, I got the paint. You know, what's the problem here? And he learned that it was largely political. So he said, well, screw that, I'm going racing where I have to perform. And whoever's at the end of the track first is going to win. And that's why that statement of Christian made him so mad, because he's like, no, this is ability, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
You know, so
And sometimes racing's more political than the car show.
We didn't
Yeah,
know
I was
that.
gonna say.
I had no clue. I mean, I legitimately thought it was. It wasn't. That was negotiating that because I want to headbutt people.
Yeah.
My answer is just I'm going to headbutt you, and apparently that's not the way to get political change.
no.
Yeah.
And I think in those years, you know, so now we're talking the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the racers got savvy to the media coverage and learned, especially on the TV side. You know, there were guys who apparently watched a lot of NASCAR and would literally say, before this interview, let me get the right hat, you know, and thanking the sponsors and all that. And it started to feel less of what you guys kind of started and more into something that was, you know, at least aspiring to be more professional. But Dave, I don't know if we never really talked about it, but these people would come to me and say, hey, you know, you've got this TV coverage, but the magazine, Hot Rod Magazine, is only doing a couple pages at a time. Where's the love there?
Yeah.
And I remember getting all wrapped up in a race somewhere east of the Mississippi, which is where they all were, flying back to LA and being in editorial meetings, and we're like, okay, so you know, we're going to do this rear end story, and we're going to cover this car show. We're going to do a couple pages of the NMCA, and then we're going to do, you know, a biography on this guy. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You had this amazing content from these stories of guys who are giving it their all and racing, and it's only a couple pages. And I think there was a disconnect because the West Coast guys, you know, a lot of them weren't there.
Yeah, and the other element was we owned the NMCA at the time. And so there was like an obligation, and anytime you tell an editor you have to do this, that's the one thing they don't want to do. And I think it all came down to that. And honestly, the big name guys with a lot of money were pressuring us to give them all the ink. And fortunately, I wasn't at Hot Rod at the time. I had moved over to Carcraft, and I wasn't covering the big tire stuff. I was on top of basically you guys. I think I did a story on your olds at Carcraft.
Yep.
And I did, you know, all these guys.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had a lot more freedom than they did. And at the time, the staff had turned over, and I'm trying to think who was there at the time.
Diana.
Yeah, Diana was basically running the NMCA, and Tony would call him. It's like,
They were buddies.
they're not letting me park my semi where I want to park. And John would then call and go, let Tony park his semi.
Which all went down to me, and I was
Exactly.
Well, and
I was at the bottom.
Rhoe McGonigal was editor of Hot Rod.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And he thought this stuff was cool, but I think Rhoe is in a position, and you know this all too well, when you're at the helm of Hot Rod Magazine, you have an endless stream of responsibilities. You've got stuff coming from every direction that you are obligated to fit into that many pages every month.
Right.
Or somebody or many somebodies are mad, including your higher ups, your advertisers. It's hard to please everybody.
When it was, you know, Jeff Smith, me, Cole Quinnell, Rob Canan, those guys, Will, it was like, you know, we created this. We want to cover it. These guys are rad, you know. And I think when the staff completely turned over, it was like,
And it changed right then.
yeah, not invented in our backyard. They wanted to do their own thing. And you know what? I've done that to I don't know how many magazines, so I'm not critiquing them for it, but I think that's why it fell down.
But the sad part from our perspective, or from my perspective, is that if you look today and you watch the TV shows that are on today, it's us. I don't mean to be a bad guy here, but there was as much drama, there was as much nuttiness,
Yep.
there was as much crazy. You could have made a TV show 20 years ago
Absolutely.
about that exact stuff, and
Right.
believe me, the wild men that were out there would have been doing it then. And the thing is, now all of a sudden there's guys doing it, and I give them all the credit in the world, Kamikaze and all those guys, they're doing great. But I'm telling you the truth, we were doing it in the 90s,
Yeah.
and the sad part is, it almost felt like the rug was yanked out from under us, where we weren't given the opportunity to go to that next level, because we would have. Well, these guys still did.
We all would have done it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we all would have done it professionally, but I'm saying these guys did because they own shops.
There was
But it
no
would've been-
internet then.
Yeah.
There weren't that many car TV shows then. As a matter of
But
fact,
dude, I was
Hot Rod
watching
TV was
on
like the
ESPN
first.
Yeah.
donkey basketball. I'm watching guys riding a donkey playing basketball. I'm going, and I can't watch the NMCA. Are you people kidding me?
Yeah.
Well, and some of that too, you got to understand, when we were covering the series for Hot Rod, we had a budget, and we had, at that time, the production company was not in-house. So there was a production company that was contracted to produce the shows. And I was the in-house guy to work with the production company. And I would say, okay, we need to have cameras there overnight.
Was that Michael Rose, Joe? Who was it at the time?
That was WATV Production
Okay.
with Lenny.
Yep, Lenny.
And I said, we need to have cameras there overnight. And they're like, well, no, you're booking a 10-hour day, and the cameraman's this many hours, this many dollars, this is all you got. So do you want your camera there overnight, or do you want to see the race? You know, it's like, well, how can we budget this up a little bit? And they're like, why do you want cameras there overnight? And I said,
Yeah.
because
That's
that's
when all
what
the
Nick's
fun
talking
begins.
about. This is where the stuff happens, and this is where the viewers are going to go, yes, that's great,
Yeah.
this is interesting,
It
I'm going to
would've
learn
hooked- it would've been
something.
great.
Because what I've learned is that whenever you can give the viewer or the reader connection to where they go to the event the next day or the next one, and they go, yeah, this guy, Tony, he was in the pits all night putting a motor in that thing. You know, that's a story they can tell and they can share. They love it. So we didn't have the resources. So I started bringing a camera back when mini DV tapes first started coming in. But unfortunately, the low light, it sucked. You know,
Yeah.
that was a problem. But the other thing was that I remember
These guys are just as happy there's no footage. Trust me.
well, you know, that's why we're here today. Right. But I remember having a meeting when the show was on Speed Channel. So Speed Vision became Speed Channel, which was
Right.
owned by Fox. And they were like, we love this drag racing. We want round by round coverage. We want, the track announcer on camera doing this like you're watching an NHRA race. And I said, well, we don't have the budget for the giant jib cams and all this other stuff. you know, we always tried to do this from kind of a feature side where you got to know Tony Bischoff, you got to know Bill Torvato and Nick and all you guys, and give them some time. And they're like, yeah, but we want the cars over, you know, and then put up the leaderboard and be done. So that's why a lot of the stuff didn't come out that way as much as I wanted it to. And that would have been, you're right, a full-on precursor to everything you're seeing today. So the idea was there.
The story leading up to the race was a lot of times 100 times better than the race itself.
Oh, no doubt.
You know, what it took to get there, you know, between the, you know, say the two finalists or whatever, you know, that was to me was much better than the race.
Tony, you'll appreciate this. So there's the Joliet race. Jeff decides that we're going to stick a different cam in the motor. We're dynoing on whatever Wednesday. We got to be at the track on Thursday or whatever day it was. So we slide a cam in on the dyno, and I mean it has 0 valve to piston. It gets to the point where we go get a welding rod, an aluminum welding wire, and sticking it through in there to see if the valves crush. How much is it crush? Really, how much do we have? And it gets to the point he looks at me, and it's probably 2 in the morning, and he goes, "I'm really sorry. We got to take the motor apart and fly cut the pistons." And we had already been dynoing. So I'm like, okay, we're taking the motor apart. And we take the motor apart, fly cut the pistons, put the cam in. It makes good power. It did fine. I didn't sleep, you know, whatever. That was a great story. But the best part of the story is I'm in the final round against Glidden in the lights, giving him the finger through the corner of the window net like this, giving him the finger, and he's putting his chute away, and he goes, "You know, you son of a bitch, I saw you doing that." I just wanted you to know it was like seeing somebody next to you at the end of the race.
Yeah, nice. Well, you know, somehow, somewhere, I think it'd be a great project to document those kind of stories too. Nick and I had dinner with Chuck Samuel in Vegas one year, and he was telling me the very short version of the story is probably 3 hours before qualifying, the last car to qualifying number 1, he was on an off-ramp TIG welding an axle back into the triple axle trailer on the side of the road. You know, so you're right, you know, what it takes to get there, a lot of people don't have any concept. And you know, fans show up and it's like, hey, it's Friday, it's race day, let's see the fun weekend, and all you guys are like, oh man, already wiped out, and then you got to perform, you know. It was intense.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
So must have been. We're still doing it.
You guys are full in it.
Yeah.
You're driving a Camaro that's not Oldsmobile powered.
Right, Camaro, yeah.
Yeah. Give up.
Yeah, you gotta keep up with the times, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, but the car you race now is more suited towards what's being built today, though.
Yeah.
LSs are a bigger thing for
Yeah,
the business.
LSs are huge.
Yeah.
Good for business.
Look how the cars themselves have evolved in just the
Yeah,
last 5 to 7, 8 years.
Who would have ever thought back then we'd have 802 sensors and race packs and shock sensors?
Exactly. We never had none of that stuff.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Well, guys, I really appreciate the time. This could go on all night, but I think we've hit our window. So, ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for those on stage and in the audience that participated in helping create this streetcar drag scene. This was a lot of fun. Thanks again for doing it. I'm Kevin Oeste here at the 2018 PRI Show, telling some stories, most of which are true.